Hello everyone, welcome to Diplomatic Briefing. The China-EU summit will be held in Beijing next month. Recently, trade negotiations between the EU and the United States have made little progress, and the grace period announced by Trump is about to end. How the US-EU tariff dispute will conclude remains to be seen. Recently, while the EU has been making small moves against China, it has also been complaining at the same time. According to a Bloomberg report on June 25, the EU ambassador to China, Jorge Toledo, stated that Europe is asking China to understand the fears and concerns of European businesses. A shortage of rare earth magnets has had a very serious impact on European companies. Toledo said that the EU hopes China can resolve the issue of rare earth magnet exports to the EU next month. In April this year, after US President Trump imposed extremely high tariffs on China, China quickly responded with countermeasures, including export controls on a range of critical minerals and rare earth magnets. Industry insiders have revealed that China is establishing an export licensing system. As the effects of these controls began to show, Western companies started loudly complaining about a rare earth shortage, teaming up with the media to hype up the so-called weaponization of rare earths, in an attempt to launch a public opinion campaign against China. In response, the spokesperson for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has previously made it clear that China's export control measures are in line with international practices, are non-discriminatory, and are not targeted at any specific country. A spokesperson for the Ministry of Commerce also recently stated that China has, in accordance with the law, approved a certain number of compliant applications for rare earth exports. Reports say that in recent months, China's exports of rare earths and magnets have dropped sharply, causing disruptions in the global supply chain for automobiles and other high-tech products. Europe has been especially hard hit. Although China has promised to speed up the approval process, the rare earth shortage remains an ongoing issue in Europe. Toledo said that overall, the trade and economic relationship between China and Europe is not very clear-cut. He also revealed that European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and European Council President Charles Michel plan to visit China next month. After that, Toledo began to air his grievances. He cited data showing that since 2017, China's economy has grown by 40%, but EU exports to China have dropped by 30%. He also claimed that Europe only wants a fair competitive environment. Bloomberg pointed out that in recent years, the EU has been gradually increasing trade pressure on China, and in 2024 decided to impose tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles to offset what it calls unfair subsidies. However, data shows that in the first 5 months of this year, China's trade surplus with the EU grew by nearly 23%, reaching a record $117 billion. After the Trump administration came to power, it wielded tariffs against the world, while the EU has been trying to persuade Trump not to target the EU in the trade war. According to reports, after Trump took the tough stance against the EU on trade and security issues, many people believed this would provide an opportunity to improve relations between the EU and China. However, the EU's attitude toward China is quite ambivalent. On one hand, it engages in trade with China, but at the same time, it tries to shift the blame eastward, attempting to emphasize to the Trump administration that China is the real common threat to the US and the West. For example, at the earlier G7 summit held in Canada, Ursula von der Leyen tried to reach a consensus with Trump by criticizing China's export restrictions on key materials such as rare earths and magnets. On the 26th, when responding to questions about the approval process for rare earth exports to the EU, Chinese Ministry of Commerce spokesperson He Yadong stated that China has always attached great importance to maintaining the stability and security of global industrial and supply chains. He said that China is continuously accelerating the review of export license applications related to rare earths in accordance with laws and regulations, has already approved a certain number of compliant applications according to the law, and will continue to strengthen the approval process for compliant applications. China is willing to further strengthen communication and dialogue on export controls with relevant countries, and actively promote and facilitate compliant trade. To sum up a few observations, first, rare earths do indeed hit Western companies where it hurts, but their politicians are using the wrong approach to deal with it. When Trump treated Europe this way, the EU did not reflect on itself. Instead, it tried to shift the blame onto China. Acting like this will make it very difficult to earn China's trust. Second, China currently treats the EU somewhat differently from the US. The more trouble you make, the slower the approval process. Overall, China is a bit more lenient with EU companies, but of course, it also depends on the terms the EU brings to the negotiations with China. Third, now that China and the US have reached a framework consensus and are in a temporary truce, China will generally speed up the approval process for rare earths. However, the methods for controlling rare earth exports will become increasingly systematic, which also means ensuring that China's influence in this field does not weaken. On June 25, the Wall Street Journal, citing sources familiar with the matter, reported exclusively that in recent weeks, Chinese authorities have required rare earth companies in China to provide lists of relevant personnel, including details such as their specific expertise, educational background, research experience, and personal information. The purpose of this is to establish an official directory of Chinese rare earth professionals and to closely monitor these individuals to ensure they do not go abroad and leak confidential information. The report states that this list involves upstream companies, such as rare earth processing enterprises, as well as downstream companies, such as those that use these processed minerals to manufacture rare earth magnets. According to the report, this move indicates that China's control over rare earth resources is becoming increasingly significant in terms of geopolitical importance. As a key material widely used in automobiles, electronic products, and military equipment, rare earths have always been a central focus in the field of China-US trade. The Wall Street Journal reports that for many years, companies in other countries have been almost unable to compete with China in the production of rare earth magnets. As China introduces a series of rare earth export control measures, countries such as the United States and France are making efforts to develop their own rare earth industries. However, one of the main obstacles is the lack of expertise in rare earth production outside of China. Processing rare earths requires painstakingly separating individual rare earth elements from raw materials. These elements have similar chemical properties and are often mixed together, while the equipment and processes developed by Chinese scientists are widely regarded as industry-leading. The report mentions that on December 21, 2023, China's Ministry of Commerce and Ministry of Science and Technology issued an announcement regarding the catalog of technologies prohibited or restricted from export. In the prohibited export section, technologies for the refining and processing of rare earths are included, specifically covering rare earth extraction and separation process technology, production technology for rare earth metals and alloy materials, preparation technology for samarium cobalt and neodymium iron boron magnets, and preparation technology for rare earth borate oxides. The adjustment of the catalog immediately attracted the attention of several American media outlets. Bloomberg stated that as the world's main supplier of rare earths, China's inclusion of rare earth metal and rare earth magnet manufacturing technologies on the prohibited or restricted export list could make it more difficult for the United States and other Western countries to secure strategic raw material supplies, hindering the West in this supply competition. Although this new regulation itself does not affect the export of rare earth products, it may still impact the development of the rare earth industry in other regions. On April 2 of this year, the Trump administration in the United States wielded tariffs against the world, imposing so-called reciprocal tariffs, with tariffs on China reaching as high as 145%. In response, China immediately introduced a series of targeted countermeasures. In addition to raising tariffs, China also imposed export controls on nickel, antimony, aluminum, bismuth, and 7 categories of medium and heavy rare earth-related items. At the time, the Financial Times quoted industry insiders as saying that China was establishing an export licensing system. In December 2024, China also announced strict controls on the export to the United States of gallium, germanium, europium, superhard materials, graphite, and other related dual-use items. Earlier this month, Reuters cited 3 sources reporting that, with the introduction of export control policies, China had implemented a tracking system for the rare earth magnet industry. These insiders revealed that China's tracking system has already taken effect, requiring manufacturers to submit additional information online, including transaction volumes and customer names. According to insiders, China announced a high-level plan to establish an information tracking system for rare earth products as early as June last year, but it has only been mentioned again now. The report suggests that this additional layer of scrutiny indicates that China's export controls on rare earths and related magnets may become a long-term policy. Meanwhile, China is almost monopolistic in the production of these materials. At the same time, the United States and other countries have been hoping that China would lift its export bans. Tim Zhang, the founder of a market research firm in Singapore, believes that based on their current assessment, China will continue its rare earth export control mechanism, as this is a trump card in China's hand. Another insider stated that the Chinese government's long-term goal is to track the entire rare earth production chain, not just rare earth magnets, in order to strengthen industry regulation and crack down on illegal activities such as smuggling, illegal mining, and tax evasion. In fact, on May 9th of this year, the Office of the National Export Control Coordination Mechanism organized a special meeting with various departments to launch a campaign against the smuggling and illegal export of strategic minerals, which at the time had already attracted international attention. On the same day, the South China Morning Post reported that some analysts believe this move by China aims to strengthen the enforcement of a series of export control measures on critical minerals, which are vital to the U.S. defense industry. Some U.S. media also noted that this happened just one day before Chinese and American representatives were set to travel to Geneva, Switzerland for economic and trade talks, making the timing quite significant. At the special meeting held that day on cracking down on the smuggling and illegal export of strategic minerals, it was pointed out that since the country implemented export controls on strategic minerals such as gallium, germanium, europium, yttrium, and medium and heavy rare earths, some foreign entities have colluded with domestic criminals, constantly coming up with new smuggling methods in an attempt to evade enforcement. On June 13th, the American media outlet The Washington Post published an article stating that although uncertainties remain, U.S. companies have welcomed the fact that China has started approving some rare earth exports. However, some analysts have also cautioned that China's rare earth magnet export licensing system is permanent, and China will not allow American customers to stockpile rare earths. Verdue, managing director at the American consulting firm Teneo, wrote in a report, China may not approve enough exports to allow American customers to stockpile, thereby ensuring that China's influence in this sector does not diminish. China may also not, or even absolutely will not, approve rare earth exports to U.S. defense companies and their suppliers. In conclusion, China will strictly manage the export of rare earths, including refining technologies and related processes, continuously refining various precautionary measures. By precisely controlling supply, rather than cutting it off completely, China can maximize the deterrent power of this trump card.